Under the humid skies of Panama City, a long line of uniformed officers stood guard before what looked like a mountain of white-wrapped bricks, each one a piece of evidence in what authorities are calling the largest maritime drug bust in Panama's recent history. The nation's elite national aeronaval service, known as SENAN, announced that it had seized approximately 12 tons of cocaine from a vessel reportedly bound for the United States. The discovery was made aboard a ferry operating in the Pacific Corridor, a route often exploited by traffickers seeking to move narcotics from South America's production zones northward towards Central America and the US coastline. What unfolded next was a scene of precision and symbolism, one that captured both the scale of the fight against drug trafficking and the growing regional tensions surrounding Washington's latest military buildup in Latin America. Rows upon rows of neatly stacked cocaine packages stretched across the tarmac, guarded by armed officers wearing SENAN insignia. Their stance was rigid, their eyes fixed on the cargo that had just been taken out of circulation. For the cameras, the visual told a simple story: victory in the war against drugs. But for the officers and prosecutors behind the operation, it was also a message, one of coordination, deterrence, and international consequence. This amounts to a total of approximately 12 tons of illicit substances, a historic achievement since the establishment of the National Aeronaval Service. It was a declaration of scale and of pride. Since SENAN's creation, Panama has positioned itself as a frontline state in the hemispheric fight against narcotics, intercepting shipments that flow north from Colombia and Venezuela through complex maritime networks. De Gracia emphasized that the operation was not just about numbers, it was a signal of Panama's commitment to the broader hemisphere. With this drug bust, we reaffirm our commitment to the hemisphere and regional security. We understand that this significant blow also disrupts transnational organized crime, potentially impacting other regions of this continent. His words carried a message aimed as much at Washington as at the cartels. Panama's cooperation with US anti-drug agencies has deepened in recent years, but it also comes at a time when Washington has stepped up its own military presence in the Caribbean and Pacific corridors, part of an expanding campaign framed as counter-narcotics operations. To many observers, the timing was no coincidence. Just days earlier, the United States deployed additional naval assets to the Caribbean, a move that US officials described as part of Operation Shield Wave, an intensified push to interdict maritime drug routes and to target what the Pentagon has labeled narco-maritime networks with transnational reach. Yet, while Washington celebrates its partnerships, some regional governments view the new deployments with unease. For Panama, caught between global trafficking flows and shifting great power interests, each successful seizure underscores both cooperation and vulnerability. As De Gracia's remarks echoed across Latin American news outlets, cameras shifted to the country's chief prosecutor on the case, Julio Villarreal, who offered a glimpse into the human dimension of the seizure. Standing before microphones, Villarreal outlined the multinational composition of the crew arrested during the operation. In the coming hours, the individuals who were on board this ship, all of whom are foreign nationals, including Venezuelan citizens, Nicaraguan citizens, Colombian citizens, and Ecuadorian citizens, all will be or have already been placed at the disposal of the competent judicial authority to determine what is legally appropriate. His statement painted a familiar picture: a multinational smuggling crew operating far from home, caught in a complex web of maritime enforcement. In recent years, Panamanian prosecutors have noted an uptick in such mixed crews, often assembled by cartels that outsource logistics to independent traffickers. For the men arrested, the next chapter will unfold in Panama's courts. But the broader narrative of how 12 tons of cocaine made it that far north stretches across borders and continents. Behind the scenes, Panamanian officials say the bust resulted from weeks of intelligence cooperation. SENAN vessels had reportedly been tracking the ship's movements for days, working alongside both US Coast Guard advisors and Colombian naval assets. Sources within the security establishment describe the operation as a coordinated maritime intercept, one that involved surveillance aircraft, radar stations, and rapid deployment units. To many analysts, the operation's scale is telling. 12 tons of cocaine represents not just a historic seizure, but a logistical operation worth hundreds of millions of dollars on the black market. Experts estimate that the shipment, once processed and sold on US streets, could have fetched close to $1 billion. That figure alone underscores why cartels continue to risk ever larger maritime runs despite intensified crackdowns. But there's another story unfolding here, one tied to geopolitical alignment. In recent months, Panama has found itself increasingly courted by both Washington and regional blocs. As the US government expands its military cooperation agreements under President Trump's renewed counter-narcotics hemisphere initiative, Panama has emerged as a strategic ally, hosting joint training exercises, intelligence exchanges, and naval coordination programs. Critics, however, warn that such deepened ties risk drawing the country into broader regional rivalries. Latin American observers have pointed out that the surge in maritime patrols, including US strike groups stationed near Venezuelan waters, could escalate tensions with Caracas and Moscow, both of which have condemned recent US operations as violations of sovereignty. Still, for Panama's government, the visual power of this bust speaks louder than any diplomatic tension. The images of law enforcement surrounding neatly packed blocks of cocaine will circulate for weeks, a reminder that Panama remains a critical choke point in the hemisphere's drug corridors. SENAN officials have confirmed that the ferry's route originated from South America's Pacific coast, a region notorious for cartel-linked maritime logistics. The vessel reportedly attempted to blend in with legitimate commercial shipping before being intercepted in Panamanian waters. In local newsrooms, the event is being described as el golpe histórico, the historic blow, a phrase meant to symbolize both national pride and regional resolve. Commentators note that the timing, just as US warships enter the Caribbean, projects a dual message: Panama's capability and its willingness to cooperate, but also its independence in enforcing its own maritime laws. Meanwhile, analysts caution that even such record-breaking seizures only scratch the surface of the global cocaine trade. According to regional drug enforcement data, maritime trafficking accounts for more than 80% of cocaine shipments leaving South America, and for every vessel caught, several others may slip through. Still, the morale boost within SENAN is undeniable. For officers who have faced growing threats from traffickers armed with high-speed boats and drones, this seizure validates years of investment in radar technology, aerial surveillance, and joint training with allied forces. At a press event following the announcement, De Gracia stood beside the seized narcotics, his tone measured but resolute. He framed the bust as a collective achievement, a symbol of Panama's unwavering defense of legality and sovereignty. Local reporters noted the symbolism of his words, that this was not merely a policing act, but a reaffirmation of national identity amid turbulent regional politics. Off-camera, prosecutors continue to piece together the network behind the operation. Early reports suggest the cocaine originated from the Colombian Pacific, routed through Nicaraguan intermediaries, and financed by a transnational organization with logistical bases in Ecuador. This structure mirrors the sophisticated supply chains of major South American cartels, decentralized, multi-jurisdictional, and heavily reliant on maritime concealment. In Washington, the US State Department was quick to praise Panama's action, calling it an example of hemispheric cooperation against transnational narcotics. But some analysts question whether the increasing militarization of anti-drug policy is achieving its stated goals. Even as seizures reach record levels, global cocaine production has hit historic highs, with synthetic variants now entering the market. Panama's role, therefore, is both frontline and fragile, balancing between enforcement and diplomacy, cooperation and autonomy. For Panamanians watching the evening news, the images of 12 tons of seized cocaine evoke a mixture of pride and concern. Pride in the skill of their law enforcement agencies, concern over what such a massive shipment says about the networks operating in their waters. As the sun sets over Panama City, the bright blue tarps covering the cocaine stacks glisten under floodlights. The officers remain on duty, rifles slung, watching as evidence teams photograph and catalogue the packages. Each brick is numbered, weighed and sealed, destined for storage and eventual destruction under judicial supervision. What remains, however, is the story, one that stretches beyond Panama's borders. From the coca fields of Colombia to the coastal hubs of Ecuador and Nicaragua, and onward to the lucrative markets of North America, the seizure marks a single interception in an endless cycle.